If this is what it was meant to be, why is it like this? Hello my poppets, I'm Saffron Ayton and welcome to Unexpectedly Interesting, a new series I plan to make for this channel. Now, for those of you who don't know Ravenscar, here's the rundown. Ravenscar is a small village atop cliffs. It's situated in North Yorkshire in the UK and has a large hotel and a bus which runs twice a day to Scarborough. So clearly the most populated of places. And yet, this tiny place was originally meant to be a large town. And it has a surprising history. But first, some credits. So at the beginning of this tale we find Captain William Child, who builds Ravenhall, which was finished in 1774. The house is then passed into the care of his daughter Mary, but she has no kids, so then we get to his son, who didn't have any kids either, and so finally the property is passed to Richard Child, who was his grandson by his third child Anne. At this point Richard just starts doing all of the gambling and disreputable behaviour, and ends up in debt to 3 people, causing loads of his furniture to be sold off in 1840. However, the most important of these 3 people is William Hammond, here represented by Richard Hammond. The 2 other don't really matter. In both 1841 and 1842, Ravenhall was put up for auction. And these were unsuccessful because, let's be honest, who really wants to buy a beautiful secluded mansion in the middle of nowhere? Certainly not me. So after all these auctions, William Hammond just goes, okay, let's just settle. I'll look after all of it. And then he spends the rest of his life trying to build a railway at 600 feet above sea level. It went surprisingly well. I mean, it was finished after he was dead, but it lasted for like a decent time period. So, success? Then it gets sold to this guy called Charles Edmund Newton Robinson, which is a great name. And this is when the idea of Ravenscar as a resort, a new seaside town like Blackpool meant to rival Whitby to the north and Scarborough to the south. So Charles's father was already involved in creating seaside resorts, so he tried to emulate the success by creating the Lands Trading Company in 1884. The plan was to purchase large amounts of land in Ravenscar, at that time called Peak, before they realised they wanted a better name, and the surrounding area, and then split it into separate plots, which would then be sold off in auctions. This would result in a larger seaside town, which would be serviced by the nearby railway. Believed it would work because they already had success with Tankerton, which was purchased in 1890, and Salcombe, which was purchased in 1894. So when he purchased the Peak Estate in 1895 and formed the Peak Estate Company with George Petter, there was reasonable expectation of success. The purchased land was split into over 1,000 plots for sale, and you can see this from this map from a few years later. Additionally, during this period they built up Ravenhall, and in 1897 it was sold to Walter James Hudson, and then again he sold it to his own company in 1898, Hudson Hotels Limited. During this time period a lot of plots get sold, there are big auctions throughout the late 1890s and early 1900s. By 1900 a number of plots have been sold and it's about to look like it's a success, but this is when stuff starts to fall apart. Although the vast majority of plots were sold, the vast majority weren't built. A lot of that land which was bought, nothing was done with it. The reason basically nothing was done was probably the additional cost, which many didn't expect. For example, they had to pay for sewers and roads, and they had to pay extra if they wanted them connected, and you get the picture. Additionally, a lot of the plots were sold for like less than half the sales figures, so that wasn't great. And however, what I think is the most important aspect of this was it was a really bad idea to begin with. Ravenscar is 600 feet above sea level. Is a beach which is very inaccessible. For contrast, Salcombe, the location of one of the earlier more successful places, is roughly 150 feet, and nearby Whitby stands at the low 200s. Moreover, it's pretty desolate. It's surrounded by moorland on one side and the sea on the other, so yeah. However, what about nowadays? Could it ever happen? I mean, with the new technology, we could probably make a nice path down to that beach. It has seals on it. That's quite cool. But really, no, not really. By the 1960s, very few houses had been built, and by 1976, the area was bought by National Trust, who run it to this day. So in conclusion, that's the story of the town which never was.